Welcome back to the McCoy Leadership Podcast, elevating your impact through valuable insights and conversations about leadership. Welcome back to another episode of the McCoy Leadership Podcast. Today we have Gabrielle Bosché with us, which is a dynamic thought leader, an author, and runs her own business as well. And we're going to talk today about finding purpose. And I think we're actually going to have a little bit of a role reversal where she's going to take over as the host for a little while. And we're going to use me as an example and try to find what my purpose is. So Gabrielle, tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you ended up here.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on your show. Being an expert in purpose isn't exactly something that you go to college for. In fact, I majored in religion and political studies. So pretty much the two things that you're not supposed to talk about at Thanksgiving dinner. I doubled up. But my journey of really being so passionate about purpose discovery started from my own experience of being frustrated with the answer so many of us are asking, which is what's next for me. And so at key seasons of my life, whether it was figuring out what I was going to do after college, or after relationships, after starting companies and failing, after writing books and succeeding, I kept asking this question of what's next for me. And what I realized was so many people kept telling me, Gab, you need to find your purpose, which is really beautiful advice to give, but very frustrating advice to receive. And so myself and my husband, Brian, who's my business partner and life partner, we went on this journey of, can you reverse engineer a systematic, scalable way to help other people find their purpose? Because if purpose is so important to find, why isn't there a system out there? It just seemed like purpose was for the 1%. It was this like exclusive, expensive, far out thing that was really hard to attain and to achieve. And so we went through this process of really reverse engineering kind of the four cornerstones of purpose discovery based off of first principles, based off of ancient Stoic belief, based off of modern motivators, and based off of brain science and motivation. So what we really found was that there's four cornerstones of purpose. And that when you find those four cornerstones, it really helps you get clarity about what's next for you in your life, in your relationships, and in your business.
So you mentioned right there two things that really interested me. You mentioned, and right back to back, failure and success. And then we're talking about purpose, but can you get to a purpose and get to everlasting success and never have a failure? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I wish that purpose was the Teflon against failure. But as a voice in leadership yourself, you understand how important it is to lean into failure, because failure is really the fuel to help you learn more about what you should do and where you're going. Now, what purpose does do is give you clarity. So having clarity does not protect you from failure, but giving clarity gives you conviction that the failure is going to be worth it. There are plenty of times in our life where we're frustrated with the failure of maybe starting a company, it didn't work, or having a relationship that didn't work out, or trying to start something that you feel like you're supposed to do, but just the economy or time or whatever causes it to not happen. And that moment of failure, when you finally admit that the thing you wanted isn't working, that moment should be the revelation of, whenever there's a failure moment, there's a reflection moment to say, is it because number one, I wasn't supposed to do it, so maybe there wasn't alignment with purpose? Number two, I wasn't supposed to do it right now, so it wasn't on the timeline of my purpose. Or number three, is it something I was doing just because I thought I was supposed to be doing it? And honestly, having coached thousands of people on purpose discovery, I found that most people are in category number three. Most of us are picking up things on the side, hobby projects, things that hobby businesses, hobby passions, because we think that's what we're supposed to be doing, because we live in a society that's go, go, go. Like if you ask most people, how have you been? They'll all say the same thing. Busy. Everybody says busy. That's actually how we measure our necessariness inside of society these days. And so what I found is, if you can really help people reflect on, is what I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Is what I'm doing aligned with my purpose? And is what I'm doing giving me a feedback loop of fulfillment, which we'll talk about here in a moment? That really does help give people a framework to make decisions from.
That sounds like really valuable information. What I gleaned out of that is if I know what my purpose is, that may very well change how I handle my failures.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. And I think that it needs to, because it gives you a perspective and it gives you meaning of your failure to your failures, and it gives purpose to your pain. But more importantly, I think that it actually gives authority from your story. So whenever you have gone through something and you have failed forward, meaning that you've learned something and you actually turned out better on the other side of it, you now have wisdom and perspective that the people who are just 2 steps behind you are so desperately needing. And so many times I meet people who feel like they don't have the authority to help other people. They're like, I couldn't coach on that. I couldn't speak on that. I couldn't lead a team through that. But the truth is they're 2 steps ahead than the people that they're leading. And those 2 steps are so important. And just by turning around and saying, what do I know now that I wish I knew then? You can then be released into a whole new era of finding incredible fulfillment in what you get to do every day.
But in today's age, it's so much easier to just blame someone else, right? I mean, if I failed, it can't be my fault. It must be something else. The government did something wrong. I didn't get that opportunity because so-and-so sabotaged it, so on and so forth. What makes the difference between taking that step from being someone that when they fail, it's someone else's fault? And that doesn't mean they won't have success at some point, but how do you get from doing what's easy? And many times it's our family and the people around us that are like, oh, poor Amos, he had this thing happen and it wasn't his fault. And then it starts to sink in and we start to feel that way. So what's the difference between the person that just kind of goes with everybody else and the person that can make it?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to the concept of agency. When you have agency, you believe that you're in control of what's next. When you have a low threshold of agency, then you tend to blame the world around you, blame experiences, economies, exes. And when you realize that you have far more control, not just in what's next for you, but in finding fulfillment right now, something really important happens. Because what I've seen, and we've taught purpose discovery to the U.S. military, we've spoken everywhere from the CIA to Expedia, Comcast, Google, Microsoft, and having spoke on all of these stages around purpose discovery for individuals and for teams, I found so many times people think that purpose is about this next season. I need to change to therefore be in my purpose. And I think that that's also too amplified by the change addicted society that we're in. Is, if I don't like where I'm at now, maybe I should move and then I'll be happier in a new house or a bigger house. Oh, I don't like where I'm at now. Maybe I should change my relationship status or change my job or change my income streams. But so when you realize that you have full agency to experience fulfillment right now, something really powerful happens. And therefore you stop putting on a timeline or an extreme change to then bring you joy and fulfillment. You start to realize that you have the recipe for helping other people with what you have. And it's important to note that purpose is the best of what you have to help others. Purpose is the best of what you have to help others. And when you realize it's not your job, it's not your economic status, it's not the season of life that you're in. If you were without a job, you would have no purpose. If your kids left, if you think your purpose is just to be a spouse or a partner, when you became an empty nester, you wouldn't have a purpose. So it's really important to know that it is the best of what you have to help others.
All right. Now, I'm just getting overly excited to ask this question. Can you help me find my purpose?
Oh, yeah. Let's do it. I love
it.
So there's a couple key questions, and for your listeners, if they're interested, they can actually go through this process themselves. It takes about 20 minutes, and it's called the Purpose Factor Assessment. So they can go to purposetest.com and actually do this themselves, and in 20 minutes, it will give them a 49-page report on their purpose. So pretty cool. So we're going to do a bit of an accelerated version of this with you right now. So one of the first questions I'd like to ask is, Amos, what have you overcome that you can help other people overcome?
Throughout my life, starting when I was very young, I do not have a college education. I went to college for a short period of time and realized it wasn't for me and that there were other ways I could learn. And I think that is one key, is leveraging and understanding that everybody learns a little bit different, and understanding if you know how you learn, you don't need college, you don't need a school. And if you want to be a doctor, I want you to go to college. I don't want a non-college educated doctor operating on me. But at the same time, I think understanding that about yourself and how you learn and how you can leverage that to learn things rapidly so that you can adapt and overcome. So, for instance, today I'm well known in the consulting world to be very helpful with financials. And so I never went to school for it. I learned everything. I read a lot of books. I worked with a lot of people, but it's all back to understanding how I learn. And then the second piece, I think, is, overcoming all the barriers as a young manager and learning those early leadership lessons and being able to instill that in others so that they know how to work with people. I think those are probably the two biggest things I've overcome.
I love it. Okay, very helpful. Second question for you. What has been your most fulfilled day at work?
I honestly have to say the most fulfilled day is when I feel like I've connected with a group and given them something that they can grow on.
Awesome. Is there a specific instance that you can think of when there was a particular challenge that your team needed to lean on you for?
So I think probably, and I'm going backwards a little bit, but I think when I was in my management role, we were we had an entire team, we were instituting a new accounting system, ERP system, and point of sale system. And it was a huge undertaking, multiple weeks of work. Everybody was starting to get it, everybody. I mean, you're working 12, 14 hours a day. And then when we got to the end of it, we knew that there was like this 18 or 20 hour workday. And so I brought everybody together and we had a little bit of a leadership session. And as we started to go through it, all of a sudden, by getting everybody to revisit what the vision was and why we were there and what we were doing, you saw the light bulbs starting to go off. But then on top of that, through us having that conversation, somebody said something, they had an idea, I had an idea, and someone else had an idea. And then I was able to take all three of those and come up with a third idea. And we turned that last 18-hour workday that we were all dreading into like 8 hours. Mm-hmm. So, but really it was just seeing that and sparking that. And I realized at that moment that that's the power of giving people and making sure that they understand the vision and how they fit into it.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, third question. What size of problems do you tend to enjoy solving for other people? Do you see yourself looking at kind of society, worldwide problems, like big, hairy, challenging problems, or do you find more joy and fulfillment solving problems for a specific group of people or more on an individual or small group level?
That's a tough one. When you started to ask the question, I was ready to say, I'll take the biggest, most complex problem I can find. But at the same time, where do I get the most enjoyment? And I think I get the most enjoyment from small groups and one-on-one situations where I can tell that something that I've said or relayed has made some sort of impact, and then you can watch that grow. So, some of the best experiences are knowing that there are people that I worked with at some point. They were colleagues or employees of mine, and now they're running their own businesses or they've become managers. So I think it's more on that one-on-one or small group.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Okay. Final question. When you look back at your life, and you can kind of answer this as specifically or as generally as you want, what has been the biggest challenge that you had to overcome before the age of 18? So when you look back at kind of those formative years of what we call your coming of age, what was kind of a moment or series of moments that most shaped your perspective?
So early childhood, parents were together, didn't get along. One alcoholic parent, well, actually two alcoholic parents, one going into recovery, one not going into recovery. Later, then they were separated. I lived with the non-alcoholic parent, or the recovering alcoholic parent, excuse me. And I think really the biggest thing for me to overcome before that period of time was to just get comfortable being me and understanding that I am an individual. I might be different, but I have my own unique strengths. And at some point when I was in those high school years, I started to realize and become comfortable in my own skin. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I have ever overcome is just learning and being comfortable with me.
Yeah, super good. Okay, thank you for sharing that. Awesome. Okay, so what we've got here is pretty interesting, and thank you for sharing some background. I share a similar childhood, and what we found is kind of those 4 questions can help us identify number one, what's going to bring us most fulfillment. So that's something that's really important, and that's actually a bellwether of whether we know we're in our purpose or not. Most people aren't walking around saying, "Oh, I found my purpose." Like they're not having this aha moment. Oftentimes, it's in moments of reflection, and many theologians and many philosophers actually have that perspective, where Socrates actually said, "We only know the fullness of our purpose in reverse." And so oftentimes it's that perspective that can say, yes, we're on purpose or not. So that's why I ask questions of the past. So we want to focus on what most fulfills us. Number 2, we want to focus on what kind of problems do we enjoy solving for other people. Everything is about solving problems. The president of the country is solving problems. The barista making your coffee is solving problems. So when we find the type and size of problems we enjoy solving, we are in our purpose. The third thing that we want to focus on is what have we overcome? Because when we have that, again, your story is your authority. When we recognize how we've overcome hard things, we can then help other people overcome hard things. On the flip side, we can actually see what is maybe some kryptonite that might keep us from overcoming future hard things in the future. And then, of course, when you kind of bring all of those together, then I like to combine them with skill sets that we've developed in the marketplace. We're the only purpose discovery process that actually brings in your current skill sets, because it's not just about what you know, it's what you do. That's really so powerful. So based off of this, the 4 elements of your purpose factor are this. So number 1, you're an overseer. So the overseer brings clarity from chaos. So you're going to bring the most amount of value to yourself and to your team by being dropped smack dab in the middle of an experience where everyone's like, I don't know what to do. Do you know what to do? I don't know. We've tried everything. We've spent all this money. And Amos is going to come in and be like, I know what to do. And even if you don't at that time, you know that you have the agency to figure out what to do. Does that resonate with you?
It sure does. I just recently took on a client where their CEO had left. And so the business was without a CEO, and things were everything was running, but there was a lot of questions. And I jumped on full board and walked in and said, we're going to solve it. We're going to fix it. We're going to find a new CEO. I can absolutely do that. And so you're dead on.
Yeah. So that's that overseer. And it's a really powerful role. That's under what we call your natural advantage. So there's 5 different archetypes under each of these types. So very clear to me, you're an overseer, and that's where you're going to grow and thrive. So for you, making decisions moving forward is it going to allow me to bring clarity from chaos? Am I going to be able to have the insight and authority to be able to come in and clean things up and then help support the vision forward? The second skill set that you have which is we call your acquired skills, or this is the skill that you've developed over time. You're secondarily a strategist because you're that consultant which reverse engineers success, but primarily you're a messenger. I mean, even just seeing in how you're a learner, how you're creative, how you even shared some of the things that you've overcome, including having to essentially teach yourself how to learn and how to thrive in a world where they may be looking at what are your credentials and what college did you go to, et cetera. So as a messenger, you are really trained and equipped and almost self-trained in a way to be able to repackage wisdom so that way it can be heard and understood by others. So messengers are really trained and equipped to be able to make sure the information that they're learning is understood by other people. How does that resonate?
Again, very much dead on. Very often, family will tell you that I'm a storyteller. I mean, on that end, and even I have an 11-year-old daughter. Most of the lessons that she learns are, coming in a way, in a story, in a form. So I'm taking the information that I know will work, and then relaying it into a form that she'll understand it. And so, again, very much dead on.
That's awesome. Okay, great. So, and so for you, knowing going in the future, any potential opportunities, jobs, clients where you can be that messenger, and then to improve on that skill set as well. That's what's unique about the programs that we kind of lead people through purpose. It's through the purpose factor assessment is how can you improve on this? Because you already have the skill set. Let's sharpen that axe. The third is what we call your pull passion. So a lot of people focus on passion. We actually don't want to focus on that word because passion, the dictionary definition, is a barely controllable emotion, which isn't really that helpful. You wouldn't really give advice to your daughter about go follow your barely controllable emotion. That's horrible advice. But pull passion is the problem in the world you want to solve. And so for you, you are a need satisfier. So as a need satisfier, you see that the good of society is focused on the individual support that you give. So you simultaneously, need satisfiers are very unique in that they simultaneously can balance the individual needs with the group, kind of the group well-being. And so you flow back and forth between those. Need satisfiers also too are focused on making sure everybody has what they need to succeed, probably because you didn't have that. You had to kind of create it for yourself. You had to kind of burrow some opportunity for yourself and said, I know how hard it is. Usually pull passion is founded in the problems we've had to overcome ourselves. And you're like, I know how hard it is. I want to make sure it's not that hard for the next generation or for the next group of employees or for the next set of people that I coach. How does that resonate?
Again, very much the same. Very much dead on. And one of the other things that you mentioned, which I think is interesting as I reflect, earlier you said about, I kind of had to learn how to teach myself and to work my way through that. And interestingly, throughout my career, every job I've ever had or any situation where I'm being interviewed, I have never had somebody ask me for my credentials or where did I go to school or any of that information. And the only thing I can attribute that to is that I seem confident enough that it doesn't even dawn on them to ask that question. But it's never held me back.
Yeah, it's true. And it is that authority you have from that lived experience, which is so important. So the fourth and final element of your purpose factor is your origin strength. So that is how you overcome hard things. So for your origin strength, you are a present strength. So the present strength means that in situations where maybe there's a lack of leadership or decision making, or whenever you're needing to make a decision, big or small, you're present in the moment. And I could hear that from that moment of your most fulfilled day when everyone's trying to figure out what to do, or the situation where you're like, hey, I have to come in and work the CEO. I'm calm in the storm. You're like the eye of the hurricane, that you're like, I can be present. And when things are happening, you're present in that moment, and that's where you actually get your strength. Whereas some of the other elements, for example, my origin strength is adaptive. So when things are happening, I'm like, let's move. My husband is present strength. So we balance each other out, but sometimes we can create some friction, as you can imagine, because when we're making decisions, I'm like, let's change, let's move. And he's like, let's sit, let's stay. And so origin strength is one of those elements that whenever we work with teams, or sometimes people like couples or families will take it and they're like, oh, that makes so much sense. So how does you being a present strength and being able to kind of navigate through a place of peace, how does that resonate with you?
Makes perfect sense. I've never thought about it that way, but as I'm sitting here reflecting, almost in every instance when I have made a change in my career in the early days, it was to come in and be the peace somewhere, and to be the eye of the storm, and to take over and to get things righted. And actually, in one of my past, one of the businesses that I worked for, that was really what they did, was send me around to the different places where they might have a problem, to fix the problem and then on to the next problem. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. And I enjoyed that.
It's true. And it's one of those things. And again, thank you for sharing some of the elements of your childhood. Oftentimes present strength comes from loss. So those with a present strength tend to be most present because they know what it feels like to lose something or someone. So having one parent who's more present, who's in recovery, and then not having the presence of that other parent, most likely led to that present strength of how important it is to be present because you've had the absence of presence in your life. So we could go on and on, but it sounds like it definitely resonated. Like I said, for your listeners, if they want to go through the process themselves, it's purposetest.com, and they can check out the purpose factor and get their 49-page results. Because what's also cool is, we don't have time to go over it today, but to really focus on what most frustrates you and most fulfills you. Because I think so many times we almost live in a reactionary world where we're, like, oh, I don't like that, or I do like that. We don't take the time to be able to actually know what's going to be most fulfilling. And so even going into a new job interview or starting a new company or trying to decide what to do next, having a roadmap of what will most fulfill you and most frustrate you really creates almost like this decision-making grid that gives you clarity and confidence about what's next.
So I would encourage everybody. That was pretty amazing for an abbreviated version. And another thing, I got to compliment you. I just recently have started kind of saying this. I often encourage people, anybody can become an expert on any subject, by reading a few books, and an expert is just somebody that knows more than everybody else in the room.
Correct. Yeah.
But with that being said, there's a big difference between being an expert and a practitioner. And you obviously understand and know your system. And I'm pretty amazed. As soon as we're done here, I'm going to go get my 49-page report because now I'm intrigued. But I also want to share with you it hit me as you were talking, and as you said about, oftentimes some of these things are coming out of loss or things that might have happened in your childhood. My mother used to always ask me, like in those teenage years when you're kind of learning, and as I said, I was becoming to be comfortable with myself, there were some unhappy moments in there. And my mother would say, why are you so unhappy today? And my answer always was, I'm mourning for the childhood that I never had. Now, I was being a little bit funny, but my point is, now I get to go back to my mom and say, look, I finally proved it. I'm right. That's what was going on. I'm kidding. But a lot of truth to that. Now, what we just went through, I'm assuming occasionally you'll run into somebody that says, this purpose stuff, it's vague. It doesn't make sense. It's touchy-feely. I don't want to do it. What would you say to somebody that kind of comes up and says that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we've helped thousands of people go through purpose discovery at work, individually, within their universities, within their team. And of course, every once in a while, you'll always get someone who is perhaps skeptical. They either think, number one, you can't find purpose, or number two, that they don't have a purpose. And so in that moment, being able to help them remove the stigma around even the term purpose. Oftentimes when someone has an immediate reaction to a word or phrase concept that you are bringing to them, it's because you have a misunderstanding of the concept. So the first thing that we do is identify that purpose is the best of what you have to help others. So, do you believe that you have something that can help other people? Yes or no? The answer is always yes. Okay, great. Do you think that you have an opportunity to, if you found out what that was, do you think you'd want to look at opportunities to do more of that? Yes or no? And going through a series of questions, we've actually removed the negative stigma, because there's instances where people have misused and abused the concept of purpose, where they thought your purpose is purpose I think has been manipulated and weaponized in many ways, where it's, your purpose is to, support this organization or support this person, or your purpose is to serve in this way. And so oftentimes people think your purpose is to just support another entity, versus knowing that you have something unique that only you can really contribute. So it usually is a misunderstanding of the concept, and a simple conversation around the definition of purpose being the best of what you have to help others, I found really resets the conversation and creates curiosity, because everyone wants to know more about themselves. everyone has this kind of innate curiosity of like, why do I do that? Or like, I wonder how that influenced this. And so once you get them to a place of curiosity, it becomes a really beautiful discussion.
So you mentioned earlier you've worked with the military, and I'm kind of curious. This question just came to me, but in working with the military and helping them find purpose, I guess the first part of the question is, was that difficult to work with the folks in the military on the idea of finding purpose? And then the second part of the question is, those that you worked with, many times we hear about veterans or coming home or getting out of the service and having trouble assimilating with their civilian life. And is knowing what your purpose is, does that help those individuals on that angle to assimilate better because they now have a purpose beyond being whatever it was they were in the Army or in the military? Your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it's something really special. We've had the opportunity to work with so many veterans who are on the other side of their service, who are, again, looking for an answer to the question of what's next for me. And so being able to help them reframe what they've learned and what they've gone through and repackage it in a way that can help and serve other people is, really, really beautiful. I mean, we've helped veterans start companies and businesses. We've helped veterans start support groups. Like, we've helped veterans plug into existing companies and feel like, oh my gosh, wow, now I see that I have so much more to value than I ever assumed. And when we first started working with the military, it's been almost 11 years at this point, being brought in, what they were actually bringing us in for initially was because they were having a hard time connecting to the next generation. They're saying millennials and Gen Z were having a hard time recruiting, we're having a hard time engaging, motivating, and so how do we create this bridge? How do we have a conversation to make this to make the mission more personal to them? And so that's where we actually developed one of our core values, which is purpose personalizes the mission. So organizations such as the military, but we've worked with folks like, Goodwill, we've worked with religious organizations, we've worked with universities, nonprofits, and so many times organizations that have a big M mission, like we're doing this for the greater good, take for granted that every single person on the team may not feel personally connected. And so that's where purpose comes in. One of my favorite things to do whenever we work with companies is to put the core values and the mission statement of the company up on the screen, have everyone take the purpose factor assessment. Inside of the assessment, you actually get your core values based off of your purpose, and then have a conversation around how does your core values relate to the core values of the company? How does your purpose factor, how can you use your purpose factor inside of the company based off of the mission and vision statement of the company? And simply making that connection between where they're at now and how they can best be utilized in their current role creates higher retention rates, creates higher engagement rates, creates something that we call the conviction factor, which is believing that what you're doing is worth it. So some really cool things happen. And so, we've seen that with military organizations, nonprofits, religious groups, and it's so special to see.
That is awesome. And as I'm kind of thinking through that, so we encourage individuals to come up with their own mission statement and their own core values to kind of operate their life by. And so my question is, in your thoughts, is that kind of backwards? Should we be finding out our purpose and then developing our mission and values around that, or does it not matter?
Oh, such a good question. It's really cool, actually. So many people will email us after they take their purpose factor assessment and say, "Oh my gosh, that's crazy. The core values that came out in the test actually relate to the core values I developed on my own."
Okay.
Or that's the mission statement of my company, or that's the mission statement of my marriage. So there's oftentimes more correlation than not. And so I think that for people who have maybe the vocabulary, the time, the framework to be able to work through finding your core values on your own, what a beautiful experience, what an important thought process. But for many people, that's a completely new concept. They either didn't know, oh my gosh, I didn't even know I could do that. I've seen companies do it. I can do it for myself. I can do it for my marriage. I can do it for my my perspective, my mindset. And so I think either is great. Both, I think, is really powerful.
Awesome. You alluded earlier to working with families or couples. And so I guess this is outside of leadership for the business, but leaders lead everywhere, right? And so what's the impact there? Can this help a family? Can it help a couple? Does it bring them closer together? What are your thoughts there?
We've just seen it impact people in such beautiful ways where it gives language to how they're feeling. So, for example, the purpose factor assessment is designed for 10th grade and up. We will be creating a version over the next few years around that are for, ninth grade and below. And really, that's the cornerstone of acquired skills. Below 10th grade, it's a little difficult for us to measure the skill sets that you have. But what's really special, and we'll get notes from people all the time, say, hey, I took it and then I had my partner take it. Then we had this really beautiful discussion around how we can best support each other in their purpose, or I had my daughter take it. And so awareness is really important. And so our assessment, we see it as both a tool and a mirror. It's a mirror because it gives you language to how you've been feeling. So many of us, especially in this go, go, go kind of society, it's like, how much can we get done? We oftentimes don't measure our impact by our reflection and our insight and just having a moment to say, what should I be doing? Not what could I be doing, but what should I be doing? And so this process really does give people an appropriate amount of pause to be able to have that conversation. I think it also, too, in the report, it actually shows what some relationships could be frustrating for you, and what relationships can be most rewarding to you, and that can create some really interesting accountability. We've had people say, "Oh, that's why I got divorced." Like just recognizing that that's where some friction points were. Oh, that's how I can better support my kids or my spouse or something. And so, more information is usually better when it comes to knowing about ourselves. But I think the most important thing is, what can you do with it? And that was really our mission in developing this process. And it's, taken over a decade of collecting the qualitative research of developing the system and this process. And so giving people information that they not just can reflect on, but can react with is for us what we hope the legacy is of the Purpose Company.
I think having anything we do, having information that we can act on. I mean, it kind of like reading a book and not applying anything that's in it. I've read a book on how to fly an airplane, so now I can fly an airplane, but never actually flying one. It doesn't work that way. Now, you mentioned that it's for 10th grade and up, and kind of thinking about those high schoolers and in that range, I believe you have talked a little bit to, what is wrong with the idea of teaching to our students, get a job, as opposed to teaching, let's find what your purpose is, and then finding the right fit. How can this help us in workforce development, so to speak, from the standpoint of these teenagers that are just coming into understanding themselves, and then we tell them, go get a job? What would be the difference if we could tell them, let's find your purpose first? Your thoughts?
Yeah. It is one of the questions that we think and reflect on the most at the Purpose Company is, how do we equip people to make better decisions knowing their purpose? And one of the key pivot points in someone's life is in that high school to college kind of time frame. And when you know your purpose, you know what is aligned with your purpose and what's not aligned to it. So the first thing I think we need to do is helping the next generation is know what to say no to, not just know what to say yes to. No to relationships, no to areas of study, no to, things that sound good but aren't, no to, just filling up your schedule just to fill it up. All of those things I think are really, really important. The second thing it can really help you focus on is what we call your area of fascination. What is the thing that you want to continue to be curious around? And that's one of the cool things about acquired skills is, what are the skills that you've become educated about through either traditional education or through life experience. And so that empowers individuals, even at the youngest age of being in 10th grade, to be able to say, okay, what kind of skill set have I found myself gravitating towards? So it's not interest area, it's skill set oriented, which I think is really important. And the third thing that I think it really can help people do is start their career off by focusing on the lens of fulfillment. And so that really helps protect them from jumping into jobs just because maybe it's the expectation of a parent, maybe it's because of they just want the money, or being pushed into it because the school at the time just wanted to have an increase in that type of major. All of those things I think can happen. And so really knowing your purpose factor, what is the best of what you have to help other people, you can package that in so many ways. I mean, we have people, when you take the assessment, there's over 625 different combinations. But we have people with similar combinations working very different jobs. They could be an attorney and they could be a nurse. They could be a stay-at-home mom, or they could be a CEO. So it doesn't determine your job, but it determines how you serve people through that job. And I think that's probably the most important conversation we could be having.
I would agree. I think too many times we're encouraging children we're encouraging them to do something, anything. And that might be, in a lot of cases, we're just encouraging them to go to college. There was a period in time when college is the answer. Just go. Doesn't matter what you major in. You got to have a college degree. Even back in the 90s, I remember going through that process and saying, I went to college for a short period of time, and I was just smart enough to say, no, it's not for me. I need out. But sure. I think it's remarkable what you can do there and what you guys are attempting to do. And I would hope and encourage parents to really get their students involved. As we come to a close, I ask all my guests two questions. And really secretly, I'm just building this really big list, and someday I'm going to sell it and become rich. I highly doubt that's going to happen. But what is your go-to book that throughout your life you have continually come back to and you utilize throughout your business and life?
The One Thing by Gary Keller. It is a book that has totally changed the game. It is necessary reading for any clients who work with us in any of our programs. And the functioning question is this. So if you don't have time to read the whole book, I'll give it to you in a sentence. The one thing really comes down to one question, which is, what is the one thing that which by doing makes everything else easier or unnecessary? And when you ask that focusing question, it helps you eliminate the unnecessary and focus on the fundamentals.
Awesome. And the last question is, what is your favorite piece of technology now?
Oh my goodness. Right now I'm loving my Whoop. So I'm a big tracker. I've worn Whoops for a couple years now, and just being able to track my sleep and track my workouts, track my HRV. So that part of it has been really fun. So I'm always wearing my Whoop. That's probably my favorite right now.
Awesome. Gabrielle, it has been awesome having you on here. I really was genuinely excited to flip the roles there and find out a little bit more about myself. Where else can folks find you if they want to find more information or want to engage with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So they can take their own purpose factor assessment. It takes 20 minutes. It's $49 at purposetest.com. And that's primarily where we spend a lot of our time. You can find me on Instagram at Gabrielle Bosché and LinkedIn, Gabrielle Bosché. We're putting a lot of content out there, answering questions, helping individuals find their purpose, and loving what we do every day.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. I hope maybe we can get you back and unpack a little bit more in the future. And for our listeners, until next time, thank you so much for tuning in and listening. And don't forget to check us out on social media and our website at McCoyLeadership.com.